The day the long-awaited baby came home, the small town seemed to breathe a little softer, as if the winter wind had lost some of its bite. Snow lay piled in soft blue shadows along the sidewalks, and the street lamps glowed in halos through the dusk. Inside a modest fourth-floor apartment in an old concrete building, Marina sat on the edge of the bed, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes red from happy exhaustion, and watched her son sleeping in the brand-new pram they had managed to buy on credit. They had named him Alexei, but everyone already called him Alyosha. He had a small crease between his brows, as if he were thinking serious thoughts even in his sleep, and a habit of clenching his tiny fist when the room grew louder than he liked. Marina watched his chest rise and fall, the miniature breaths, the way his lips puckered as if he were about to cry and then relaxed again. "Stop staring," her husband Sergei laughed softly from the doorway, though his voice trembled with the same awe. "You'll burn a hole in him." "I waited 6 years for this hole," she whispered, never taking her eyes from the child. "The doctors told us we might never have a baby. You remember?" "I remember," he said, crossing the room. He sat beside her, the mattress dipping under his weight, and they leaned against each other, both looking at the pram. They were wrong. Marina touched Sergei's hand, then reached into the pram and stroked Alyosha's cheek with her fingertip. The baby sighed and turned his face toward her touch, seeking warmth, smelling faintly of milk and the lavender detergent she had chosen especially for his clothes. "Well, do everything right," Marina murmured. "We won't let anything happen to him. Not ever." Sergei did not answer, but he squeezed her hand hard, as if sealing a vow with the pressure of his fingers. For the first weeks, their world shrank to the size of that apartment. Visitors came with flowers and small gifts. Grandparents took turns holding the child, and weeping neighbors peeked in and offered advice, some welcome, some not. Nights were long, fragmented by crying and feeding and the rustle of diapers. But for all the fatigue that clung to Marina's eyes, there was a light in her that had not been there before, a quiet, blazing purpose. When the first warmth of spring arrived, still fragile, still more promise than fact, Marina decided it was time to take Alyosha out for longer walks. The pediatrician had said it would be good for his lungs. She wrapped him in layers, adjusted the tiny hat over his soft hair, and tucked a blanket around him before fastening the harness in the pram. Sergei was at work in the small workshop on the edge of town, where he repaired machinery. He called her twice that day to ask if she'd put the rain cover in the basket underneath, just in case. "I'm not stupid," she teased. "Well, be fine." She had no reason to doubt it. Their town was not rich, but it was quiet. Children played in the courtyards under the watchful eyes of grandmothers leaning on windowsills. Dogs barked behind fences. The same old drunk sat on the same old bench near the bus stop, muttering to himself about football and politics. Marina walked the familiar streets, pushing the pram, feeling proud and fragile and strangely exposed, as if the whole world could see how much she now had to lose. There was a small grocery store on the corner of Lenina and Prvomaiskaya, its faded sign squeaking in the wind. Marina often stopped there for bread or milk. On that particular afternoon, she realized halfway through the walk that she had run out of tea, and the thought of facing another sleepless night without it made her grimace. Alyosha was sleeping soundly, his face turned to one side, his breath steady. The sky had grown overcast, and a chill breeze was threading through the streets. "It'll only be a minute," she murmured to him, though he could not hear. The stroller had a sturdy brake. She clicked it on, and parked the pram right in front of the shop window under the awning, where she could see it clearly from the register. Through the glass, she could already spot the shelves with tea boxes lined up like colorful, distant promises. Inside, the shop was bright and smelled of oranges and bread. There was a short line at the counter, two older women arguing about sugar prices, and a man holding a single can of beer, but Marina did not worry. She grabbed the tea she wanted, checked the price, and stepped into line, her eyes flicking toward the window every few seconds to make sure the pram was still there, the blanket still smooth, the shape of her sleeping baby unchanged. The argument at the counter dragged on longer than it should have. The cashier had to call the manager from the back. Someone dropped a jar, it shattered on the floor, and there was a flurry of apologies and the sharp smell of pickled cucumbers. For the space of perhaps 20 seconds, Marina forgot to look at the window. When she did, her heart skipped no, seized as she saw only the pale reflection of the street, the gray sky, and the empty patch of sidewalk where the pram had been. She blinked, thinking her eyes had betrayed her, and looked again, harder. The spot was still empty, except for a scrap of newspaper fluttering in the wind. Her hand opened and the tea fell to the floor, bouncing once, rolling away. She did not notice. She shoved past the women in line without a word, felt someone's angry protest at her shoulder like a distant echo, and burst through the door onto the street. There was the awning, the cracked tile, the old cigarette butt that had been there all morning. But no pram, no blanket, no baby. For a moment, the world became soundless. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. Then everything rushed back in a roar: the passing cars, the bark of a distant dog, the squeal of brakes somewhere around the corner. Marina's mouth opened in a silent scream, then her voice found itself tearing her throat as she cried out, "My baby! Where is my baby?" She ran left, then right, stumbling, searching for any sign of the pram. She thought perhaps the wind had pushed it, though the brake had been on, though that made no sense. But she clung to the idea for one desperate second. It was not around the corner. It was not by the bus stop. It was not anywhere. Someone grabbed her arm. It was the shopkeeper, his face pale. "What happened?" he asked, but his eyes were already following her gaze to the empty spot. "Wasn't it just there? I saw you park. Call the police," she screamed. "Call them. They took my son." Time blurred into a fevered sequence of sirens, questions, and Marina's own hoarse screams. The police arrived, then more police. Neighbors gathered, then retreated, frightened by her grief. Sergei was called from work. He arrived running, his work jacket half-buttoned, his hands filthy with grease and his eyes already wild, as if he had run straight out of a nightmare and into another one. They asked if I owed anyone money. He would later remember bitterly. If I had enemies. But at that moment, he only clung to Marina's shoulders and demanded answers from anyone and everyone, his voice cracking. They watched the security camera footage from the small shop. At first, there was nothing. The pram stood outside, swaying slightly in the wind. People passed by. A teenager in a dark hoodie, an old woman with a shopping bag. Then, after what felt like an hour but was in reality less than 3 minutes, a van pulled up to the curb, just out of frame. A tall figure in a long coat stepped briefly into view, hands gloved, face shadowed by a cap. He glanced toward the shop window, toward the pram. One heartbeat, two. Then he moved with frightening swiftness, releasing the brake, turning the pram, and pushing it toward the van. The camera caught a glimpse of another hand reaching from the open side door. The pram disappeared from the frame. The van drove away. No license plate could be seen. The angle was wrong. The cameras in the surrounding streets were either broken or smeared with mud, or pointed in the wrong direction, as if the town itself had conspired to erase the trail. I only turned away for a moment, Marina kept repeating, as if saying it enough times would rewind the day. Just a moment. He was right there. I could see him. I could see him. As just a baby, Sergei whispered, over and over. He can't be gone. He can't. The days that followed were a blur of searches, interviews, and false leads. Everyone had an opinion. Some said it was a random crime. Others muttered about an organized group that traveled from town to town, stealing children to sell them or raise them as their own. No proof ever surfaced that convinced the authorities beyond doubt, but rumors had a way of filling the void where certainty should have been. Marina and Sergei clung to any scrap of hope that drifted their way, no matter how small, no matter how absurd. The police promised to do everything. Posters were printed with Alyosha's picture, a snapshot from the apartment, his eyes wide, one fist stuffed into his mouth. The posters went up on bus stops, clinic doors, and school fences. Television stations ran the story once, then again, then moved on to other tragedies when no quick resolution appeared. The world's attention wandered. The parents did not. Weeks turned to months. The crib in Alyosha's room remained untouched. The mobile above it, with its rotating plastic moons and stars, gathered dust. Marina began waking in the night hearing phantom cries, stumbling down the hallway to find nothing but silence and the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Sergei grew quieter, the lines around his mouth deepening, his laughter disappearing first from his eyes, then from his voice entirely. Friends tried to comfort them. Some avoided them, frightened by the depth of their grief. The apartment that had once felt too small now seemed vast and empty, every corner echoing with absence. Far away, how far? The parents could not have guessed. A van rumbled along a potholed road that cut through fields and patches of dark, silent forest. Inside the van, its windows blacked out with grime and old newspapers. A baby cried until his voice grew hoarse, then hiccuped into exhausted whimpers. The people in the van were not a family in any legal sense. They were a clan, a loose, shifting group bound by long-standing ties of necessity, shared crimes, and the hard edge of survival. Some had been born into it. Others had joined because they had nowhere else to go. Their homes were caravans and temporary encampments, hidden in the edges of cities or deep in the countryside, moving whenever suspicion grew too keen. At the center of this clan was a woman called Zoya. Though it was not the name she had been given at birth, she was in her 50s, with streaks of iron gray in her black hair and eyes that seemed to weigh and measure everything they saw. Children in the clan feared her, but they also knew that she never let anyone go hungry, not if she could help it. She had organized their lives into a rough, brutal order. Who went where to beg, who picked pockets at crowded markets, who served as lookout. She knew which corners of which towns were watched by police and which were not. She knew how much each child could bring in on a good day, and what to do if someone brought in less than they should have. When the van reached the encampment, a cluster of battered caravans and makeshift tents tucked into a dip in the land and shielded by a line of trees. The baby had fallen into a shallow, fragile sleep. His face was blotchy from crying. His fists were open now, lax with exhaustion. The man who had taken him, a tall, gaunt figure named Mikhail, lifted the child from the makeshift bed they had fashioned on the van floor and carried him toward the largest caravan. Zoya stood in the doorway, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. "Is this the one?" she asked. Mikhail nodded. "The town was small, just like you said." The mother left him outside the shop. "It was quick. Any trouble?" "No. They won't know where to look." The cameras were useless. Zoya considered the child, her gaze traveling over his face, his hands, the thin hair on his head. He stirred, his mouth quivering, but did not wake fully. "He is pretty," she said at last. "They always cry more, the pretty ones. They miss the softness." She turned, calling into the caravan. "Irina, come out here." A younger woman emerged, wiping her hands on a stained towel. She had kind eyes, though they were shadowed with fatigue, and her clothes hung loose on her thin frame. Two children peered from behind her, one no more than 3, with a runny nose, the other about 6, his eyes sharp as glass. "This will be yours," Zoya said, gesturing at the baby. "Feed him, rock him, make him stop screaming. You will tell people he is yours if they ask." Irina looked startled. "Mine? But my boys already. Do you want to eat?" "Do you want them to eat?" Zoya snapped. "He will bring us money when he grows, if we keep him alive and teach him well. If not, he will be another useless mouth." "I don't keep useless mouths." Irina flinched, then nodded quickly. "I'll take him." She reached for the baby with careful hands. He was still warm from the van, still smelling faintly of the detergent from his mother's home. When Irina cradled him, an old ache stirred in her chest, memories of a baby she had once held who had not lived through his first winter, taken by fever in a hospital that smelled of bleach and despair. Her eyes blurred for a moment. She blinked the tears away before Zoya could see. "What's his name?" one of Irina's boys asked, his voice small. Zoya's lip curled. "Who cares what his old name was? That life is finished. Call him something else." Mikhail shrugged. "We can't keep saying hey you forever. He needs a name, or the neighbors will talk." Zoya's eyes narrowed. "You worry too much about neighbors," she muttered. Then she tilted her head, studying the baby again. "Well, call him Leon," she said finally. "It sounds strong, like someone who survives." Leon. The name hung in the air, settling over the child like a thin new cloak over the remnants of his old identity. He whimpered once more, then opened his eyes. They were gray, unfocused, filled with the simple demand of all babies: warmth, safety, the presence of a familiar heartbeat. He did not know that somewhere, miles away, his mother was tearing her throat raw, crying for a son named Alyosha. He did not know that a man called Sergei was walking the streets until his feet bled, showing strangers a worn photograph and asking, "Have you seen this baby?" He did not know that his old life had ended at the curb of a small grocery store and that a new, stranger life had begun. Years passed. The encampment moved from place to place, but its structure remained the same. Children grew like weeds between caravans and fires, learning early that the world did not owe them kindness. They learned to run fast, to hide quickly, to lie without blinking. They learned which adults would hit them for disobedience and which would merely sigh and shake their heads. Leon grew among them, not knowing any other world. He did not remember the apartment with the fourth-floor view of the gray buildings. He did not remember the lavender scent of Marina's hands or the way Sergei had bounced him gently when he cried. His earliest memories were of damp mornings, his breath steaming in the air, and Irina's arms around him as she muttered a lullaby half-remembered from her own childhood. He remembered the taste of thin soup with too much water, the feel of rough blankets, the sound of Mikhail's laugh when someone made a crude joke. But he also remembered hunger on days when the takings had been poor, He remembered Zoya's cold stare when he came back empty-handed from a day in town. He learned quickly that affection here was conditional, always tied to usefulness. At 5, he was sent to stand near the market entrance with a tin cup. His cheeks streaked convincingly with tears. Irina had taught him how to make his eyes look bigger, how to let his lower lip tremble. She had smoothed his hair and straightened his too small jacket. "Remember what I said," she whispered. "You tell them your father is sick. You tell them your mother died. You don't tell them anything about this place. You are alone, and you never, ever talk to the police. Do you understand?" Leon nodded, his small hands clenched around the cup. "What if they ask my name?" "Tell them whatever you want," she said. "Names are cheap." From his post by the market, Leon watched the steady stream of townspeople. Some averted their eyes. Others dropped coins into his cup without meeting his gaze. A few stopped to ask questions, probing gently around the story had been given. He answered with the practiced lines Irina had drilled into him, adding a sniffle here, a calculated pause there. The coins rattled into the cup. At the end of the day, when he brought them back, Zoe counted them with nimble fingers and grunted in grudging approval. "He has a face that makes people feel guilty," she remarked. "We can use that." As he grew older, Leon graduated from begging to other tasks. Mikhail taught him how to lift wallets in crowded buses, how to unclip watches from wrists, how to follow a mark without being seen. The lessons were not gentle. If Leon hesitated or failed, Mikhail's hand would lash out, a sharp, reflexive slap that left the boy's cheek stinging. "You think the world will be kind if you're not fast," Mikhail would say. "You think they'll feed you because you're a good boy. No one gives you anything. You take what you need, or you starve. Isn't there another way?" Leon asked once, nursing a bruised rib after a job gone wrong. Mikhail snorted. "For people who are born in houses with locks on the doors and names on the mailboxes, maybe? Look around you. Do you see any of that here?" Leon did look around, and he saw only the sagging caravans, the smoke-stained tarps, the women washing clothes in plastic basins, the children kicking a half-deflated bowl in the mud. Houses with locks and names were something he saw from the outside. Fleeting glimpses through bus windows or from the shadowed alleys where he waited for a signal. Over time, resentment settled into him like a slow-burning coal. He resented the people in those houses, with their store-bought toys and warm lights. He resented the way they looked at him with suspicion, pity, or contempt as if they could smell the dirt and desperation on him. He resented the law that always seemed to side with them, not with him. If there had ever been a moment when the path ahead of him could have forked toward something different, it came and went without his noticing. When Leon was 12, Zoya called him into her caravan. The interior was cramped but carefully arranged, blankets folded in neat piles, jars of preserved food stacked along one wall. A small icon tucked into a corner. The air smelled of incense and tobacco. "You're not a child anymore," she said, eyeing his lanky frame, the beginnings of muscle on his arms. "You're smart. You don't waste time. You don't cry like some of the others." Leon stood straight, ignoring the nervous flutter in his stomach. Praise from Zoya was rare. "We have an opportunity," she continued, "a job that needs someone like you. It's more complicated than picking pockets or grabbing a purse. It will take time, patience, and a cool head. If you do it well, you'll earn your place here in a way that cannot be taken away." He swallowed. "What kind of job?" She studied him for a moment, as if weighing his soul. "There is a family in a town not far from here," she said. "They lost a child many years ago. A baby stolen from a stroller outside a shop." Her eyes gleamed with something cold. "Rumor has it they never stopped looking. They still cry for him. They still hope." Leon felt a strange twitch in his chest, like a muscle spasming. "Why do we care about them?" "Because people who never let go of hope are easy to manipulate," Zoya said calmly. "There's a woman who has been asking questions about us. An old woman from that town. She thinks she knows something about that missing child. And she came close enough, once, that it made me uncomfortable." She leaned forward slightly. "We want to know how much she knows," she said. "We want to know if the police are still listening to her or if they've grown tired of her. We want to know where that family keeps their valuables. Because people who cling to the past often fill it with things they could, in theory, live without." Leon felt his throat tighten. "What does that have to do with me?" "You have the right age," Zoya said. "Her lost baby would be about your age now, perhaps a little younger. All they have are old pictures. Babies change. Memory is soft. Grief makes people see what they want to see. There are marks we can use, scars, birthmarks, details that can be mimicked." He stared at her, each word landing like a pebble in his stomach. You want me to pretend to be their son, he said slowly. I want you to go with the old woman when she comes to us again, so I corrected. She will come. She's too stubborn not to. I want you to play the role she's secretly hoping to find. You will go to that family's home. You will learn everything about them from the inside. You will make them feel safe. And when the time is right, you will tell us what we need to know so that we can take what we want. And then we will leave. They will be left with nothing but their ghosts. And you will return here with your pockets full and your place secure. Leon thought of the warm lights of those houses, the way he had always been on the outside looking in. He thought of the hunger that still visited the camp on bad weeks. He thought of Irina's sunken cheeks and the way the younger children's eyes followed every piece of food. What if they find out I'm not really their son? He asked, his voice low. Zoe shrugged. Then you improvise. You're good at that. Besides, they won't want to believe it. Hope is a powerful drug. People will swallow any lie that tastes like it. There was a part of Leon, a small, buried part that recoiled from the idea. He imagined mother's face lighting up at the sight of him. Imagine calling a stranger mama while knowing that somewhere his own face had once made someone else's heart overflow. But that part of him had never been fed. The life he knew rewarded cunning and ruthlessness, not sentiment. He raised his chin. I'll do it, he said. Zoya smiled, a thin, satisfied curve of her lips. Good. Then we will begin. The old woman came 2 weeks later, as if summoned by the very thought of her. Her name was Tamara, and she had the restless eyes of someone who had spent too many years chasing shadows. Her hands shook when she spoke, partly from age, partly from the raw nerves that grief had left exposed. She had heard whispers about a clan that passed through one particular town. Around the time the baby disappeared, she had heard rumors of a boy in one of their caravans who did not look like the others. The police had indulged her at first, then eventually began to sigh when she appeared, placing a hand on her shoulder and telling her gently that she needed to accept reality. She had smiled and nodded and then kept searching. When she entered Zoya's caravan, she clutched a worn envelope full of photographs. I know you've seen many children, she said, her voice trembling. I know people come and go here. Maybe you're not responsible for anything that happened. But if you've ever seen a boy who looks like this, please. I'm an old woman. I just want to give my niece an answer before I die. Zoya listened, her face solemn, her eyes unblinking. She took the photos, examined them with the care of someone who understood their power. A baby in a pram, a toddler on a blanket, a boy of 3 holding a toy car. In each picture, the same eyes, the same serious little crease between the brows. I have seen many children, Zoya said slowly, but none exactly like this. At least, not that I recall. Tamara's shoulders slumped. However, Zoya continued, her tone shifting slightly. There is a boy here who does not resemble the others. He was brought to us under circumstances I did not control. And though I cannot say he is the one you seek, perhaps it would ease your mind to look at him. Tamara's head snapped up, hope flaring so fast it seemed to burn away years of fatigue. Please, she whispered. Please let me see him. Zoya called for Leon. He had been given instructions. How to stand, how to lower his eyes at first, how to let the woman search his face. He had seen the photographs, memorized the details. He knew about the scar on the child's left shoulder, a mark from a burn, Tamara had said. Tears in her eyes. Zoya and Mikhail had given him a similar scar, carefully inflicted with heated metal. The smell of his own burning flesh searing itself into his memory. When he stepped into the caravan, the old woman gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The photographs slipped from her other hand and scattered across the floor. Oh, she choked. Oh, my God. Alyosha. Leon felt the name hit him like a physical blow, even though he did not recognize it as his own. It carried so much weight, so much longing, that it seemed to reverberate in the air. He hesitated just long enough for it to look sincere, then took a tentative step forward. I don't know that name, he said, as he had been told. They call me Leon. Tamara's eyes filled with tears. It doesn't matter, she whispered. Names don't matter. Your eyes, that little crease. She reached out with shaking fingers, but stopped short of touching his face. Do you remember anything? Anything at all from before this place? He shook his head. It was not entirely a lie. His memories before the encampment were a fog of sounds and sensations. Tamara turned to Zoya, her voice rising. You took him, she said. Or someone here did. You must have. Look at him. Zoya raised her hands placatingly. We did not take anyone, she said smoothly. Children arrive here for many reasons. Some are abandoned. Some run away from places where they are not wanted. We do not ask too many questions. But if this boy is truly your niece's lost child, we are not monsters. We do not hold grown men and women in chains. If he wishes to go with you and you can prove who you say you are, I can, Tamara said quickly. We can do a test, whatever you want. But I don't need it. I know in my heart. She turned back to Leon, her eyes shining. Your mother's name is Marina. Your father's name is Sergei. You were stolen when you were just a baby. We have been looking for you ever since. Please, come with me. Let us at least see if it's true. Leon looked at Zoya. For a moment, something like genuine uncertainty flickered inside him. He had expected to feel only cold calculation, but the raw, naked hope in the old woman's eyes stirred something he could not immediately suppress. Zoya's gaze was steady, her message clear. This is the job. Do it. Leon swallowed, then nodded slowly. Oh, go, he said. If they let me. Oh, they will, Tamara said, her voice breaking. They will. The boy who was still called Alyosha and someone else's heart left the encampment that day, with a small bag of clothes slung over his shoulder and instructions ringing in his ears. He sat in the passenger seat of Tamara's battered car, watching the trees slip past, feeling both heavier and lighter than he could remember. In a small town some distance away, in the apartment with the fourth-floor balcony, Marina and Sergei paced like cage animals. When the call had come from Tamara, Marina had dropped the phone. Sergei had picked it up with trembling hands, listened, and then sat down hard on a chair as if his legs could no longer hold him. A boy, he had said, his voice hoarse. She found a boy. She says he looks like him. She's bringing him here. Don't, Marina had whispered. Don't say it. Don't. What if it's another mistake? I can't. We have to look, he said. We owe him that much. And her. Now they waited. The same clock ticked on the wall, its hands having traced circles around their grief for years. The posters with Alyosha's baby face had long since peeled from the town's walls, but in a box under their bed, they kept copies of everything. News clippings, police reports, the first missing person flyer with its hopeful script. When the doorbell finally rang, Marina felt her knees buckle. Sergei put an arm around her, steadying her, and together they crossed the small hallway and opened the door. Tamara stood there, her face more lined than they remembered, her eyes red. Beside her, a boy of about 12 shifted nervously from one foot to the other, clutching a small bag. His hair was cut short, his clothes were worn but clean. His eyes, gray and wary, flicked between their faces with the alertness of someone who had learned to assess danger quickly. For a moment, no one spoke. The air seemed to hum with the weight of the moment. Then Marina made a small sound, a whimper, a sob, a gasp all at once, and lifted a hand to her mouth. Sergei stared, his own face draining of color. He saw the eyes first, then the set of the jaw. Then, as the boy shifted, a glimpse of a scar on his shoulder where the collar of his shirt had slipped. Alyosha, he whispered. Leon's throat tightened. He had rehearsed this. He knew he was supposed to hesitate, to look confused, to say he did not remember. Instead he found himself frozen, staring at the man's hand, which was gripping the doorframe so hard the knuckles had gone white. I don't know that name, he said finally, his voice emerging hoarse. They told me my name is Leon. Marina reached out, her hand shaking. It doesn't matter, she whispered. It doesn't matter what they called you. Come in, please. Just come in. They led him into the apartment. It was small, but immediately he sensed something different from anywhere he had lived before. The air was warm in a way that had nothing to do with the radiator. The walls were crowded with photographs, weddings, birthdays, summer picnics. There were books on the shelves and small souvenirs on the windowsill. A seashell, a smooth stone, a tiny wooden church. In the corner, as if frozen in time, stood a crib. The mobile above it had been dusted recently, its plastic stars gleaming faintly. Leon's chest clenched. We never could bring ourselves to get rid of it, Marina said softly, noticing his gaze. We told ourselves we were keeping it in case he came back. But really I think we kept it because getting rid of it would have meant admitting he never would. Sergei cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. We should sit down, he said. Talk. There are tests we can do to be sure. Blood tests, maybe something else. But when I look at you, he trailed off, unable to finish. Tears were gathered in his eyes. Leon sat on the edge of the couch, his bag at his feet, his back straight. Their kindness pressed against him like a weight. They offered him tea, sandwiches, fruit. He accepted everything, his hands shaking slightly as he ate, unused to such abundance. Where did you grow up? Marina asked gently. What do you remember? He told them the story Zoya had crafted. Vague fragments of camps, caravans, people who came and went. He described Irina as the woman who fed me rather than as a mother. which was not far from how he had always thought of her. He spoke of moving often, of never knowing exactly where they were. He spoke of begging, of being told not to talk to police. Marina's face crumpled with every detail, her imagination filling in the blanks with horrors he did not even mention. Sergei's jaw clenched. Tamara sat silently in a corner, watching, her hands twisted in her lap. "Well, make it right," Marina whispered. "Whatever they did, however they treated you, well, make it right. You're home now. Home." The word landed in Leon's ears like a foreign language. He had never had one. The encampment had been many things: harsh, demanding, sometimes cruel, but it had never been home in the way the word was used in television shows, had sometimes glimpsed through other people's windows. In the days that followed, the apartment rearranged itself around him. They cleared out the crib, turning the small room into a proper bedroom. They bought him clothes, amazed and appalled at how few he had arrived with. They took him to a doctor, who examined him with professional detachment and then spoke softly to Marina and Sergei in the hallway, scribbling notes. The police were informed. They took blood samples, fingerprints, photographs. They asked Leon questions, gently at first, then with more pointedness when they realized how little he could provide about his early years. Still, the physical resemblance, the scar, and the timelines were enough to make them cautious. They sent samples to a distant lab for more precise testing. While they waited for the results, life in the apartment settled into a strange, tense rhythm. Marina hovered, torn between the overwhelming urge to mother the boy and the fear of pushing too hard. She cooked his favorite dishes before she even knew what his favorite dishes were, guessing at what a 12-year-old might like. Sergei tried to talk to him about ordinary things: school, hobbies, the football team he supported, but Leon could feel the questions behind every question. "Do you remember? Do you feel anything? Are you ours?" At night, alone in his new room, Leon stared at the ceiling. The bed was soft, the blankets warm. The faint sounds of the town drifted in through the window: the hum of distant traffic, the bark of a dog, the occasional shout. It was a world away from the rustle of tents and the crackle of campfires. He thought of Zoya's instructions. He was supposed to be observing, cataloging. Where did they keep their money? Did they have jewelry? How did they lock their doors? Did they own anything worth taking? He had noticed some things already. A small box of savings hidden behind books, on a shelf a set of gold earrings. Marina wore only on special occasions. But each time he imagined passing this information on, a sour taste filled his mouth. Still, the habits of survival were strong. One night, he slipped into the kitchen and quietly tested the window latch. Another evening, he noted the way Sergei double-checked the front door before bed. He stored the information away, even as a part of him rebelled against its purpose. His behavior confused Marina and Sergei. At times, he was sullen and aggressive, snapping at small requests, slamming doors, glaring when they asked him simple questions. Other times, he seemed almost desperately eager to please, helping with chores, volunteering to take out the trash or carry groceries. "We have to remember what has been through," Marina told Sergei after one particularly tense dinner. When Leon had stormed away from the table after a harmless comment about homework. He grew up in a completely different world. He doesn't know how to be this, how to be someone's son. "I know," Sergei said, rubbing his temples. "But sometimes when he looks at me, it's like he's looking at a stranger he's planning to rob." "Don't say that," Marina whispered, though the same thought had flitted through her mind in her lowest moments. Days blurred. Tamara visited often, watching the boy with a mixture of awe and caution. The police came once more, asking for patience as they awaited the test results. In the meantime, far from the apartment, Zoe and her clan were not idle. Leon had been given a cheap phone before he left, disguised as a second-hand gift from Irina. He was supposed to use it at night, when the others were asleep, to send brief messages, observations, schedules, details. At first, he forced himself to comply, typing with stiff fingers in the dim light of his new room. "There is some jewelry," he wrote one night, "small amounts of cash. Not rich, but not poor. Third-floor neighbors have a better car. The father works at a workshop," he wrote another time. "Leaves at 7, returns around 6. Mother stays home most days." Each message felt like a betrayal carved into his skin. And yet, when he imagined defying Zoe, he saw Irina's gaunt face, the children's hungry eyes. He saw the way Zoe's anger could flare like a match in dry grass, igniting everything it touched. Weeks later, the test results arrived. Marina and Sergei sat in the small office of a police investigator, their hands entwined so tightly their fingers had gone numb. Leon sat in a plastic chair across from them, his heart pounding loud enough that he was sure everyone could hear it. Tamara perched on the edge of another chair, clutching her purse. The investigator cleared his throat, his expression carefully neutral. "The DNA analysis is conclusive," he said. "With a probability of more than 99.9%, this boy is your biological son." Marina let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Sergei stared at Leon, his eyes filling with tears he did not bother to hide. "It's him," he whispered. "It's really him." Leon sat very still. He had known, logically, that this was possible, likely, even given the lengths to which Zoya had gone. But hearing it said aloud, hearing the certainty in the investigator's voice, cracked something open inside him. He was not just an imposter wearing someone else's skin. He was, in fact, the missing piece of these people's lives. He did not know how to feel about that. As they left the station, Marina slipped her arm through his, as if afraid he might be snatched away again at any moment. Sergei walked on his other side, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "You're ours," Marina whispered. "No one can argue with that now. No one can take you away." Leon thought of the phone in his pocket, of the messages he had already sent, of the plan that was still in motion. He swallowed hard. "I need some air," he said that evening, after hours of tears and celebration. "Just a walk. I'm not used to all this." "Do you want me to come with you?" Sergei asked. "No," Leon said quickly. "I just need to clear my head." Outside, the air was cool. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. Leon walked to the end of the block and then ducked into a small side street, his breath visible in pale clouds. His phone buzzed. He took it out with trembling hands. "Well?" The message from Zoya read. "Is it done? Are you in?" Leon stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over the keys. "Yes," he typed finally. "They did a test. It's true. They're my biological parents." There was a pause. Then another message. "Even better," Zoya replied. "Now it will be easier. You will tell us when they are vulnerable. You will leave a window unlatched. You will make sure they are gone at the right time. We will do the rest. Then you return to us with whatever you can carry. We will be gone before they understand what happened." Leon's stomach twisted. He thought of Marina's face when she had heard the test result. He thought of Sergei's hand on his shoulder, the weight of it both unfamiliar and strangely grounding. "If we wait a little," he typed, his fingers clumsy. "There isn't much here. Not enough to be worth the risk." He hoped, irrationally, that greed would make Zoe cautious. But her reply came back quickly. "You are not there to think," she wrote. "You are there to obey. This is not about a single family. It is about sending a message. They have been stirring trouble for years, always asking questions about us. It is time they learned what it costs to poke their noses where they don't belong. You will do your part, or you are no longer one of us." He stared at the words "no longer one of us" until they blurred. The idea of being cut off from the only community he had ever known, harsh as it was, frightened him more than he wanted to admit. Where would he go if both worlds rejected him? His thumb moved almost of its own accord. "Fine," he typed. "Tomorrow night. They go to visit an aunt. I'll leave the kitchen window open." He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his heart pounding. On the walk home, every step felt heavier. The next day, he watched the hours crawl by with a sick, buzzing energy under his skin. Marina made plans to visit her sister across town, wanting to share the news in person. Sergei agreed reluctantly to go with her. He did not like leaving Leon alone. But they both told themselves it would be a good chance for the boy to have some quiet time. "We won't be long," Marina told him at the door. "There's food in the fridge if you get hungry. If you need anything, call us. Or Tamara. She's just down the street." Leon nodded, forcing his face into what he hoped was a neutral expression. "I'll be fine." When they left, closing the door behind them, silence fell over the apartment. Leon stood in the middle of the living room, listening to the fading footsteps on the stairs, the distant creak of the building settling. He walked into the kitchen. His hands were steady as he unlatched the window above the sink, leaving it open 2 inches. The cold air seeped in, making the curtains flutter. He stared at the gap for a long time, then turned away. Hours passed. The light outside shifted from gray to blue to black. Leon paced from room to room, his mind a storm. At one point, he found himself in the small bedroom that had once held a crib. Now it held his new bed, his new clothes, and on the wall, taped carefully with the corners straight, a photograph of Marina and Sergei holding a baby between them, their faces glowing. Tamara had brought it from her envelope, and Marina had pinned it up the day after the test results returned. Leon approached the photo as if in a dream. He touched the baby's face with one fingertip. He could not remember the moment it had been taken, but something inside him recognized the warmth in the adult's eyes. They had not been acting. They had not been plotting. They had simply loved. His phone buzzed in his pocket, startling him. He pulled it out. "We're close," the message from Zoya read. "Are they gone? Is the window open?" He stared at the screen. His reflection looked back at him faintly, eyes shadowed. "Yes," he typed, his fingers cold. "Hurry." He put the phone away and walked back into the kitchen. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. The window was still open, the curtains stirring. Minutes later, though it felt like an eternity, the curtains lifted more sharply, as a gust of air swept in. Then a hand appeared on the sill, gloved, followed by another. A figure swung silently into the kitchen, landing with practiced grace. It was Mikhail. Behind him, another figure climbed in, a smaller, wearier man Leon did not recognize immediately. They moved through the apartment with the fluid confidence of people who had done this many times before. Mikhail gave Leon a curt nod. "Keep watch at the door," he whispered. "If they come back early, stall them. Cry if you have to." Leon stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then he moved to the hallway, his back to the front door, ears straining. Behind him, he heard drawers opening, cabinets being searched, the soft thump of boxes being moved. Something snapped inside him. "You're not taking anything," he said suddenly, his voice low but fierce. Mikhail looked up from the jewelry box he had just opened, a gold chain glinting between his fingers. "What did you say?" he asked softly. "You're not taking anything," Leon repeated, louder now. "They have nothing. They've already lost enough. I won't let you." Mikhail's eyes narrowed. "You think you're one of them now?" he sneered. "Because they gave you a soft bed and a few hugs. Don't fool yourself. You belong to us. We made you. Without us, you'd have died in your crib." "Maybe," Leon said, shaking. "But that doesn't mean I have to help you destroy them." Mikhail straightened slowly, the chain dangling from his hand. "You think you can stop us?" he asked. There was an edge to his voice now, like glass under velvet. Leon swallowed. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew he was no match for Mikhail physically, but he also knew something else. "The police know about this place now," he said. "They know I was with you. They're already suspicious. If anything happens to this family, if anything goes missing, I'll tell them everything. Every camp, every job, every name." Mikhail took a step toward him. His eyes were dark, flat. "You would betray us?" he asked softly. "After all these years?" Leon's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You betrayed me when you lied about who I was," he said. "When you burned me to make me match a scar. When you sent me here to break the only people who ever really wanted me. You didn't make me. You used me." For a moment, something flickered across Mikhail's face, anger, yes, but also a hint of something like regret. Then it was gone. "You don't know what the world does to people like us," he said. "Out there, you'll always be what we are. It doesn't matter who your parents are. They'll see the dirt under your nails and the hunger in your eyes, and they'll lock their doors. At least with us, you have a place. But if you've already decided to spit on that," he let the chain drop back into the box. With a small clink. "Fine," he said. "Well, take nothing. This time," he gestured to the other man, who had been stuffing electronics into a bag. "Put it back." The other man looked startled. "What? Are you serious?" "Put it back," Mikhail repeated, his voice like iron. Reluctantly, grumbling under his breath, the man unpacked the bag, returning the items to where he thought they had been. It was not perfect, but it was close enough that a casual glance would not notice. "Zoya won't like this," the man muttered. Mikhail shrugged. "Zoya doesn't have to know everything." He turned back to Leon. "This is your choice," he said quietly. "Remember that. When they look at you with disappointment, when they realize you can't be what they wanted either, you walked away from the only people who would accept you as you are." Leon felt something tear inside him at the words, but he held Mikhail's gaze. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking. "Please." Mikhail watched him for another moment, then nodded once, almost like a salute. "Goodbye, Leon," he said. "Or whatever they call you now." They left the way they had come, slipping out through the kitchen window into the dark. Leon stood in the empty apartment, his breath coming in sharp, ragged pulls. His legs felt weak. He leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He stayed there for a long time, listening to the silence. When Marina and Sergei returned, they found him still in the hallway, his back to the wall, his eyes red. "Are you okay?" Marina asked immediately, dropping her bag. "What happened?" He opened his mouth. The truth crowded behind his teeth. "I almost betrayed you. I invited wolves into your home. I opened the window. Instead," he heard himself say, "I thought someone tried the door. But maybe it was just the neighbors. I'm fine. He knew it was cowardly. He also knew that if he told them everything now, they would never look at him the same way again. But the world had a way of forcing truths to the surface. The next day, a patrol car cruised slowly past the building. Then again the day after that, someone in the neighborhood had reported strange movements near the back alley. The police, still sensitive about the high-profile case of the returned missing child, took no chances. A week later, officers arrived at the encampment. This time, the cameras in the town were working properly. This time, the license plate of the van had been recorded near the apartment building on the night Leon had texted Zoya. This time, a neighbor had seen figures moving near the kitchen window and had written down part of the plate number. Combined with old suspicions and recent investigations, it was enough to justify a raid. Leon watched the news in stunned silence as footage from a distance flickered on the screen. Caravans surrounded by police cars, children being led away, adults with their hands on their heads. He saw a brief glimpse of Zoya, her hair disheveled, her face still composed even as officers held her arms. He saw Irina, clutching to crying children. His stomach lurched. He felt both relieved and sickened. These were the people who had raised him, who had fed him when no one else would. They were also the people who had stolen him, burned him, and tried to use him like a tool. As the arrests multiplied, more stories emerged. Testimonies from other children who had been taken in and exploited. Evidence of thefts, scams, and worse. The town buzzed with gossip. The newspapers spoke of an organized criminal clan finally brought to justice. For Marina and Sergei, it was a strange kind of closure. The people who had taken their son directly or indirectly were now in custody. There would be trials, sentences, perhaps some restitution. For Leon, it was a severing of the only lifeline he had ever known. "Are you okay?" Marina asked him one evening after another grim news report. "I know this must be hard for you. Whatever they did, they were still the people you grew up with." He stared at the television, where an image of Zoya's face lingered for a moment before the broadcast cut to commercial. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I don't know what I feel." In the months that followed, the clan splintered further. Some members accepted plea deals, naming others in exchange for lighter sentences. Children were placed into foster homes or returned to families they barely remembered. Irina, it turned out, had once had a sister in another town. She was contacted, and a complicated, halting reunion began. Leon did not attend the trials. He read about them in the papers if he read about them at all. He heard that Mikhail had escaped, vanishing into the city's underbelly before the raid. The thought haunted him, but no one else seemed to know what to do with that information except file it away as another unresolved danger in an already dangerous world. Life with Marina and Sergei settled into a new kind of normal. Leon went to school, where he sat in classrooms surrounded by children who had grown up with bedtimes and report cards, and summer vacations. He was behind in almost every subject, but he was quick and slowly. With the help of patient teachers and extra tutoring, he began to catch up. Still, the differences remained. He had trouble trusting authority. He flinched at sudden loud noises. He did not know how to handle simple kindnesses. They made him feel exposed, vulnerable. At times, a wild restlessness seized him, and he would roam the streets long after he should have been home, drawn to the shadows and alleys that felt more familiar than the bright, clean corridors of his new life. Marina and Sergei tried to understand. They went to counseling sessions with him, sat in waiting rooms flipping through worn magazines while he spoke haltingly to therapists about a childhood they could hardly imagine. They made mistakes, pushing too hard one day, tiptoeing too carefully the next, but they did not stop trying. "You'll always be our son," Marina told him once, when he had come home late smelling of cigarette smoke and anger. "Even when you hate us, even when you hate yourself, that doesn't change." He looked at her, his eyes hard. "You don't know me," he said. "Maybe not yet," she replied, "but I will, if you let me." He turned away, but the words lodged somewhere deep, buried under layers of learned distrust. Years passed. Leon grew taller, his shoulders broadening, his face narrowing into sharper angles. The boys at school started calling him by a nickname that referenced his time with the caravan, a cruel shorthand for everything they didn't understand. Fights broke out. Teachers called Marina and Sergei to the principal's office more times than they could count. "He's angry," one teacher said helplessly. "At everything. At everyone." "Wouldn't you be?" Marina asked quietly. When he turned 18, Leon stood on the threshold between two worlds and felt that he fully belonged to neither. To the people in town, he would always be that boy from the news. The kidnapped child returned, the one raised among criminals. To the remnants of the clan, he was a traitor, a symbol of betrayal. It was around this time that he received a message from an unknown number. Long time, it read. We need to talk. He stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Who is this? He typed. Mikhail, came the answer. Meet me if you want to stop pretending you're something you're not. The part of him that still remembered damp mornings and campfires stirred. He knew he should delete the message, show it to his parents, tell the police. Instead, he found himself pulling on his jacket and stepping out into the night. They met in an abandoned lot on the edge of town, where weeds pushed through cracked asphalt and graffiti covered the crumbling walls of a long-closed factory. Mikhail looked older, lines carved deeper into his face, but his eyes were the same. Sharp, measuring, dangerous. You grew, he said, as if making a mild observation about the weather. People do that, Leon replied, his voice flat. They regarded each other for a moment. So, Leon asked, why am I here? Because you're restless, Mikhail said. Because no matter how many clean shirts they buy you, you still walk like someone who's ready to run. Because you don't fit in their world, and you know it. You can play the good son, the normal citizen, but it's an act, and you're getting tired of it. Leon's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you, Mikhail replied. I watched you learn to steal before you could read. I watched you share your last piece of bread with the little ones, when you thought no one was looking. You're not like Zoya, or me. You have a conscience, but you're also not like them. He jerked his chin in the direction of the town. You have too much darkness for their comfort. So what? Leon asked. You want me to join you again? Join what? The clan is gone. Zoya is in prison. Half the others scattered. Exactly, Mikhail said. The old order is broken. Someone will fill that vacuum. The streets don't stay empty for long. There are already smaller crews trying to step into our place. They're sloppy. They're cruel in stupid ways. They hurt kids because they enjoy it, not because they have to. They'll make the police come down even harder on anyone without a good address. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You could do it better, he said. You know both worlds now. You understand the system they built and the cracks in it people like us fall through. You could build something smarter, harder, fairer, even, in its own way. You could be the one in charge instead of sneaking around the edges. Leon let out a short, bitter laugh. You are asking me to become the very thing that destroyed my life. Mikhail shrugged. Your life was destroyed the moment someone decided a baby in a pram was an opportunity. You can't change that. You can spend the rest of your days pretending you're just another face in the crowd. Or you can accept what you are. Someone shaped by both dirt and light. Use that. Don't let it use you. The argument was twisted, but there was a dark logic to it. Leon felt its pull, like gravity. And what? He asked. I become some kind of leader of thieves. That's your big vision? Call it what you want, Mikhail said. A baron. A boss. A protector. You make the rules. You make sure no kids get burned to match scars. You take from people who can afford it and you make sure those who can't still eat. You punish cops who beat kids for fun. You punish rich men who hurt girls because they think no one will believe them. His eyes gleamed. You always wanted there to be another way. Maybe you have to make it yourself. Leon thought of Marina and Sergei. Of the way they still watched him sometimes when they thought he wasn't looking. As if trying to see the boy they had lost and the man he had become at the same time. He thought of the town's suspicious eyes, the way rumors clung to him like smoke. He thought of the children in the encampments, the hunger, the fear. He also thought of Zoe in her prison cell, of the old clan scattered. Justice, people called it. But justice had not filled anyone's bowls. He looked at Mikhail. If I do this, he said slowly, it will be my way. Not yours. No burning children. No stealing babies. No raids on families who have already lost everything. Mikhail raised his hands in mock surrender. Whatever you say, Baron. Leon flinched at the word, but he did not reject it. In the years that followed, stories began to circulate in the underworld of the region. Stories of a man who had grown up between caravans and apartment blocks, between campfires and kitchen tables. A man who knew how to slip through cracks in the system and how to exploit them. A man who enforced his own kind of law among those the official laws had never truly protected. They called him many things. Some said he was a criminal with a conscience. Others said he was just another thief, dressed in better words. To those who worked under him, he was simply the boss. To those who feared him, he was a shadow that fell across their comfortable lives when they least expected it. To Marina and Sergei, he was still, in some corner of their hearts, the baby taken from a pram and returned as a stranger. They watched him drift further from their world, Each visit home briefer than the last. Each phone call more strained. You don't have to live like this, Marina told him once, her voice raw. You could go to university, learn a trade, do something honest. He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. I live in the world that made me, he said quietly. Sometimes I can bend it a little. Sometimes I can make it hurt fewer people. That's more than most can say. She wanted to argue, to pull him back with the strength of her love alone. But she could see the iron in him, the scars that no amount of tenderness could erase. Do you hate us? She whispered, for not finding you sooner, for not saving you from them. He shook his head. I don't hate you, he said. I don't know how to be what you wanted, but I don't hate you. Sergei stood in the doorway, listening, his hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to tell his son that he was wrong, that he could still choose another path, but the words felt thin in his mouth. After Leon left that evening, closing the door softly behind him, Marina leaned against Sergei's chest and cried. We got him back, she sobbed. We got him back, but we lost him anyway. We didn't lose him, Sergei said, though he did not fully believe it. He's still out there. He's just not ours alone. In a sense, he was right. Leon belonged to no one, and to everyone. He carried within him the imprint of 1,000 choices made by others, by the man who had pushed the pram into the van, by the woman who had organized a clan around survival, by the old woman who refused to stop searching, by the parents who never stopped grieving. He was a son and a stranger, a victim and a perpetrator, a bridge and a barrier between two worlds that would never fully understand each other. He had been shaped by theft and love, by hunger and abundance, by cruelty and compassion. He would never be normal in the way Marina and Sergei had once dreamed. When they brought their baby home from the hospital, he was something else entirely, something forged in the liminal spaces between belonging and exile, between lie and lawlessness, and in the dim corners of cities and towns, in caravans and crumbling apartments. People spoke his name in hushed tones, some with fear, some with gratitude, some with bitter envy. He had become, in his own way, a baron of the margins, ruling over a realm that official maps did not acknowledge. Yet on some nights, when the weight of decisions pressed too heavily on his chest, Leon would find himself standing outside a familiar building, looking up at a fourth-floor window where a light still burned late into the evening. He would watch the shadow moving behind the curtain and hear, in his memory, the soft creak of a crib and the faint shimming of a plastic mobile. He would stand there for a long time, caught between the world that had claimed him and the world that had been stolen from him. Then, as dawn approached and the streetlights flickered off one by one, he would turn away and step back into the shadows he had learned to call home.